Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to what's going to be another episode of The Verdict. I'm Spray and Pray 1000, and today we're going to talk about Hogwarts Legacy, which is a very controversial game, but also just a pretty decent overall open world game. For me personally, I don't have a ton of experience with Harry Potter. I've read the books at the time of me playing the game, probably at least 15 years prior. I also have played a couple of Harry Potter games in the past. I own more, but I was never really like a big fan of Harry Potter. So, when I see this game and I see all the different things about it, the biggest thing that I could say about this game is that if you really want to look at it in the lens of a hardcore gamer, it's kind of an average game. But what I really like about this game is that it's obviously meant to be more for like real in-depth fans of Harry Potter, right? So the one, I guess an analogy I would make for this is like how, they had Pokemon Go, and then they made Pokemon Let's Go, which was mostly for fans of Pokemon Go, even though anyone could play it. Like, I played it. I never really played Pokemon Go. In the same vein that Pokemon Go was kind of made for people who only really played the mobile game, and then, Let's Go was really made for people who played Pokemon Go. Yeah, you could jump into it otherwise, but obviously, for me, I might get more enjoyment personally out of maybe, say, like, Fire Red Leaf Green, right, which is a more in-depth version of Gen 1, right? In the same vein, this game is really not made for people who play, like, a lot of video games or a lot of hardcore games. It very much seems like it was made for the more, hey, I'm a Harry Potter fan, maybe I don't know, what do they even do? Talk about their wands and what house they like the most? I don't know. Anyway, this game is an open world RPG. You play as a fifth-year transfer student who gets transferred into Hogwarts, where you're going to attend, you're going to learn wizardry and stuff. You know how it is. It's hard to explain Harry Potter to anybody because pretty much everyone kind of knows about it. So, for the most part, the game toggles between being open world, where you can free roam around Hogwarts and the surrounding areas, versus the combat, which is, in the open overworld, you shoot wand casts at people, you have all the different spells from the movies and things like that. As I said, the combat might be the most complex part of the game, where you could dodge, you could reflect spells, there's different kinds of enemies that you need to hit with different colors. There's 3 different colors for spells in this game for combat. There is the red spells, which are basically your damage spells. There's purple, which is like force and manipulation. And then there's yellow, which is like enfeeblement, things like freezing enemies. You could transfigure them. You could do all kinds of stuff like that. And it's very fun, actually, when you get down into the combat, to constantly be on the move, dodging, parrying spells with Protego. Trying to keep a combo going. Now, there is a 4th kind of spell, which are the Unforgivables. If you know Harry Potter lore, you know that they are very much their own type of ability. I think the biggest thing about the Unforgivables is that you get them very late game. One of them is necessary to progress the story, but other than that, you get them very, very late into the game. And as I'm sure anyone who knows anything about this game knows, you could basically spam the Unforgivables. Like every other spell, they have a set cooldown that once it's done, you could use the spell again. Obviously, it's a crutch, right? It's not necessarily like something that has any kind of drawbacks or whatnot. But like I said, I think this game was made to be very simple. That doesn't excuse a lot of the other things, that aren't so great about it or could have been better. But when I look at this from the lens of a game they just wanted to make mostly for people that don't play a lot of video games, I think that a lot of the design choices make more sense, right? So, for example, you could spam, the killing curse and things like that in combat with no added benefit. Different people around the world don't really care if you use Unforgivables or not, which obviously in lore, it's a big deal to use it, right? Even this game references that in some of its missions with other characters that use it. But you as the main character, you're kind of just exempt from a lot of this. Obviously, this is just a gameplay element, right? They don't want you to, fail the mission because a professor saw you using an Unforgivable or something like that. Which I totally understand. And beyond that, there's other spells. For example, There's the Room of Requirement, which actually I'll get into a little bit later, has its own set of spells for like manipulating and placing and getting rid of items. There's a whole set of spells that you could use for animal husbandry. Basically, there's fantastic beasts, and you could find them, and then you can, you know, breed them, you could brush them, feed them, and this in turn gives you items that you can then use to upgrade your equipment. So it's a very interesting feedback loop in that regard, right? So, as I said, there's a lot of interesting stuff for that. But getting back to the combat, there's all kinds of different enemies, right? You have ogres, you have, I think they're called trolls. They might not be ogres. You have frogs, you have spiders, you have dark wizards, right? And each one of them has their own unique fighting style. Now, again, it's nothing you probably haven't seen in at least a dozen other open world games. One thing I will give this game, though, is that it performs very well. I played it on PS5. I had no problems with the performance. And also, just the game itself looks really good. So it looks good. I will say that about this game. Definitely, its presentation is not what's lacking. The gameplay itself, though, is very fun, very simplistic, but it still gets the job done, right? Now, this is a WB game. I wouldn't say it's like Batman Arkham style, but there is sort of a whole combat system going on. You hit people with different spells. Like I said, you can reflect their spells back. There's upgrades you could get to improve your spells and your basic combat abilities, like your dodge roll can become a blink. You can also get better reflecting. And also in combat, you could drink potions to either increase your spell power, summon thunderstorms. Obviously there's a healing potion, and on top of that, you could also throw like items, like I think it's like chomping cabbages that you could throw at enemies for big damage. So there's a lot that you could do in combat. The last thing, of course, which ties into this game's story, is the whole ancient power meter, right? Basically, think of it like a super. I'm sure everyone's played a game where as you fight, your super builds up, and then you could blow it for big damage, basically. Everyone knows this. This is not like something revolutionary or anything like that. Besides that, when you're out in the open world, you could do things like jump around. There's a little bit of parkour in this game. It's not fantastic, right? It's not like Assassin's Creed levels. It's not, anything like that. But you are still able to jump around. There's things to find in the overworld that you could pick up. You'll stumble across enemies that either will drop in or are just free roaming around the map. And most of all, you'll be able to go over and take over encampments and find loot and things like that, a la, like Assassin's Creed, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff that we've seen in a lot of games, right? So to take a break real quickly and to get into the story of the game, the story of Hogwarts Legacy, as I said, you're a fifth-year student who's transferred into Hogwarts, but you yourself have the ability to detect what's called ancient magic, right? It's like an ephemeral source of energy that just exists in the Harry Potter world. Very few people can see it, let alone manipulate it. And so you're following the trail of people, this group of people called the Keepers, who are keeping a big secret, right? And why this goblin called Ranrock wants to find this power and obviously use it to overthrow the wizarding world, right? Because goblins are mistreated at the hands of wizards. That's actually a very big part of Harry Potter lore. And it's your job as this fifth year to figure out, what Ranrock is up to and trying to stop it. So obviously we get into our usual with different kinds of games, right? We want to figure out, okay, well, what's going on? How can we stop it? As I said, standard fare. And the plot with Ranrock might have a couple interesting twists and turns. It's pretty straightforward. It's fun to, like I said, it's fun to watch play out, but it's pretty straightforward. What I really like about this game is the supporting cast. I think that the supporting cast of characters in this game is really good. I wish maybe it was a little bigger. Now, there's what I like to call, your supporting cast of characters like Professor Fig, who is your mentor, basically like your teacher figure as you go throughout the year. There's also a variety of teachers who will teach you different things like potions, herbology, things of that nature. There's also other students that you can interact with. The thing that I think is a little unfortunate is that there's only 3 students that are really major in the game. There's Natsai Onai, who comes from Uganda, and they have a wizarding school down there because in the wizarding world there's 100 different wizarding schools. It's not literally, but there's a lot. I didn't even know this until very recently. There's Poppy Sweeting, and then there is Sebastian Sallow. And basically the 3 of them, who are all from differing houses of Hogwarts, have their own plot lines and things of that nature. So, to bring it all back, as I said, because you transfer in as a 5th year, you know, they have to go through the whole sorting hat ordeal, right, where they basically poll you on what house you'd want to be in. Now, you could outright pick. The game does not railroad you into it, right? Like, based on the questions the hat asks you. It's basically, they just give you a little bit of a prompt. You could agree with the sorting hat, or you could just choose your house. Again, player choice, you know, not something that I think is necessarily lore-breaking. It's just because it's a video game. They want people to be in the house they identify with. For me, I chose Ravenclaw. I think they're really underrepresented. It was actually cool in a sense because I like the Ravenclaw cast, but none of the Ravenclaw students have major plot lines, which I think is a detriment. There is one Ravenclaw student that's part of a main story quest, but he basically quickly exits the story as quickly as he enters it as a major character and not just a side character. So Sebastian follows Slytherin, Natsai Onai is in Gryffindor, and Poppy Sweeting is in Hufflepuff. And I think what's cool about this game is that they are constantly unlocking more things for you the more you progress the game. So, for example, right at the start of the game, you don't really have any spells, you know, the basics and things of that nature. And as you progress, you meet people, right? When you meet Poppy Sweeting, you know, they teach you about, you know, caring for beasts and, you know, being able to store them. When you meet Sebastian and another one of his friends, which is Omnis Gaunt, that really is like a main part of the story, right? And that also introduces you to things like the Killing Curse. When you go along with Natsai Onai, that it's part of the main story, and it also just takes you to different places. And each one of them has a very interesting plot line. So for Sebastian, is trying to cure his sister of a curse that she was inflicted with. For Poppy, it's trying to save some snitches, right, which are very rare, believed to be extinct, and you're trying to save them from poachers. And then lastly, Natsai's whole plot line is involving about taking down corrupt criminals, which reflects a lot about her backstory. So personally, one of my favorite parts of this game is that each of these characters feels really fleshed out, and there was definitely potential for more of your grade class to be fleshed out. I don't want to say Hogwarts feels empty, but I think that one thing that they should have done is really show who's in what year, right? I feel like if they had taken a bigger approach to defining the student body, then the game would feel more like Hogwarts feels alive. But it's hard to tell if someone's a 6th year, a 7th year, a 1st year, a 2nd year. And it's understandable that, again, the scope of this game is not that big, but I think it would have helped, even if it's just like generic students, to be able to say, you know, here's where I stand, right? The game basically takes place over one whole school year. However, time does not progress as if you're thinking like, you know, like Fire Emblem Three Houses, where time progresses day by day by day. Or Persona is another one that did it. I think that more people might be more familiar with Persona 5 and well, really all the Personas, right? But you get my point, right? Time in this game progresses similarly to Bully, actually. If you've ever played Bully from Rockstar, where once you complete a main quest or a main mission, the game progresses basically to the next season, right? There's a cutscene and time passes. And while I don't hate this, right, I think that one thing that they could have evolved from Bully is definitely not just the progression of time, because I get it. They don't want people to run out of time. You game over, you have to restart, you know, whatever. But I think that what they could have done that this game also kind of does, similar to Bully, is the classes, right? Basically, classes are treated as main story quests, and then once you do them, you never really do them again. There's no reason to do them. You could walk around the castle at night, which, if you know from other Harry Potter games, which are not open world in fairness, you You can walk around the castle at night. There's no prefects that will scold you, things of that nature. And the stealth missions, because there are stealth missions with invisibility and things like that, they're fun. They're there, but they're only there temporarily, right? As missions. And then once you're done, you can't. The areas basically open up for free roam. So again, this game takes the approach of, we want you to be able to explore, have fun. We're not serious. Versus, okay, well, there's risk, right? Like, you can't just walk around in the dead of night. The prefix will catch you and they'll take points off the house competition. So this leads into another point I want to make. So allow me to back up and explain this if you're 5 years old or you just don't know anything about Harry Potter. The School of Hogwarts is comprised of 4 different houses. It's comprised of Slytherin, Gryffindor, which you probably know those 2 from the movies, and then Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, which are a little bit lesser known. Now, your choice of your house determines a couple of different things, right? Determines your homeroom, your common room is what it's called, sorry, which is where you and your various house members all hang out and things like that. It also determines just a couple things, like some items you get are determined based on your house. It determines a couple dialogues, things of that nature, right? It's an actual part of your character's story that gets referenced and called upon, which is cool, right? Especially if you're big into Harry Potter, I'm sure this must be fantastic, right? Like, you finally get to have a game, people address you as this, like I said, like the Let's Go thing where you could bring in your Pokemon for Pokemon Go. Same thing here, right? And one of the big things I really like about this game is that your house choice really does feel a little impactful. Not like life redefining, but everyone's playthrough is different. There's a couple of unique missions for each house. Some of them a little bit cooler than others, like Hufflepuff's getting to go to Azkaban. But I still feel like the house you get into, I really do feel like you're kind of representing it a little bit. Maybe more so for me because I was Ravenclaw and there were no other Ravenclaw main cast members besides, like I said, that one student who shows up in, I think, 2 story quests. One of them as an introduction to a type of class and another one as actually part of the main story. So I kind of felt it, putting Ravenclaw on my back, literally. And one of the things I wish this game had more of, which maybe they could improve for a sequel, is this game really should have had the house point competition. So what I mean by that is that in Harry Potter, right, in all the movies, and it stops being as important later on as the movies get more into their major plot. But every year, all 4 of the houses among all the grades compete in, I guess, what's called the House Cup tournament, which is basically each one of these houses has to they try to get points, right, for performance, right, in classes or doing things that impress the teachers. They could also lose points for poor performance in classes or things that anger the teachers or break school rules, things of that nature. And so it's basically a competition between the 4 houses in order for you to be able to get a cup at the end. I guess they get like a celebration or something like that. In this game, the House Cup, it's in the game, but it's only as a story thing. Like, you're basically guaranteed to win it for beating the game. And there's no like points being added or subtracted that actually mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Like, a couple teachers mention it, but it doesn't mean anything, right? Like, it's just, oh, well, you did the thing, okay, whatever, anyway. And I feel like if it was there, having that kind of competition would be interesting. It would be a little bit different in that regard. Because now it would add a little layer of competition. So, ironically, if this game wanted to go full Persona, right, I feel like maybe what they should have had were 2 different game modes, right? Hey, if you just want to have a casual, relaxed experience, nothing too hectic, nothing crazy, here you go, right? Time doesn't progress until you pass missions, things of that nature. And maybe tie the missions, like, I don't know, some other way. But if you just, the way the game is now, casual mode, totally fine. And then on the other hand, having some things like mandatory stealth at night and things like that could have been interesting. Maybe in a sequel, however they'll handle it, if they will ever make a sequel, that could be interesting, right? There's a House Cup. Yeah, you should maybe have ways to grind it out I guess if you want to ensure that people can get the platinum or get the ending or whatever, I think that's fine, right? Again, I don't think that this is supposed to be Dark Souls, or it's not supposed to be Assassin's Creed, but I do think that having that extra, give and take would have made the gameplay maybe a little more interesting. What else? So yeah, I feel like having that would have been cool. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about that I actually really like about this game is the equipment system. This game has a very similar equipment system. You can equip items on your face, your school cloak, your shirt and pants underneath. I believe you can also equip gloves and a hat, right? You could have a mask and a hat. And I think they're separate. And basically, like most other games, these things give you stats. They give you very basic stats, right? You have health, armor. I'm sorry, it's called defense, and offense, which is basically your attack power, right? And it's, again, simplified. They don't want to go crazy with it. I actually think that's fine. I think the combat being live, live real time is already complex enough in that regard. Where you're trying to juggle combos. Maybe a subset of stats could be cool. I didn't really hate it that much. I was cool with it. And like with a couple other games, you're able to socket gems into certain armor, which can give you things like more damage on different spells and things of that nature. And I think that that's one of the cool aspects about this game, is that you could really customize certain parts of it. The big thing I will say that I like about this game is that it has a transmog or glamour system. And basically what that is it's kind of like, I mean, I play Final Fantasy 14, I play World of Warcraft, but every time you pick out a piece of armor, right, or find it in the overworld or buy it or whatever, it gets added to your transmog library. I'm using transmog, I usually say glamour. And what you could do later is you could change that piece once you've equipped something in that slot to look like basically any other item you found in the game, which is awesome. Fantastic. I love it. That's such a great system. There's different things, like some robes have hoods you could pull up. There's masks you could wear. Now, the only thing I wish is that you could dye different items, right? Like Breath of the Wild lets you do that. Final Fantasy lets you do that. A couple games let you dye items different colors. Assassin's Creed, I think, lets you do that with a couple items. Maybe I'm forgetting. That would have been cool, but I like the glamour system. Totally didn't need to put it in. They did. Nothing but a positive for me. Other than that, the equipment system is pretty basic, pretty straightforward. You get a wand in this game. Now, I'm not too big on Harry Potter lore, but from what I can tell, your wand is like a reflection of you. Again, you're free to customize your wand however you want in this game. I'm assuming that, like, you have a Wizarding World profile on some website, like an official website or something, and you could go pull your stats from there. Like, you could go log in or whatever and say, oh, my wand is a cedar wood, 15 inches, slightly flimsy, right? All good. It's flavor text. It's to make you feel more immersed in the world. And, if you care about it, cool. I chose one that I thought was pretty cool. And, yeah. So I like the character customization. As I said before, you could upgrade different skills as you do things in this world, either defeating enemies, completing challenges, which usually involve defeating enemies, going to places, brewing potions, completing quests, things of that nature. You get experience points. Like every other game in the world, when you get enough experience points, you level up. You could then spend that skill point on a stat, basically, on a unlock that maybe improves Expelliarmus, right? Or it improves your potion making. And there's 5 different things. There's core spells, room of requirement, which is basically potions and brewing. There's dark arts. I forget the other 2. It's been a while. You'll have to forgive me. But you can improve things like your dodging. You can improve. Basically, one of the things I will say, though, is that most of your spells, the major upgrade for them, if you buy it, right, because there's only one upgrade per spell, pretty much, is it curses enemies. Now, they explain this. A cursed enemy just takes more damage. I think it also heals you a little bit when you hit them or defeat them. And basically allows you to curse enemies with almost any spell in the game. Now, that's just, again, gameplay element. They don't want the game to be difficult. You've already heard me say this, right? One of the things I like about this game is that you can have what's called the room of requirement. Again, I didn't even remember this because I haven't read or watched a Harry Potter book or movie in years. But the room of requirement is a room that appears about halfway through this game, maybe a little bit before the halfway, maybe like 30-40% into the game. You get introduced to the room of requirement. Basically, you go into the room of requirement, and it's like a customizable Harry Potter room that you can make. So you could put down planters, you could brew and grow, you could brew potions, you could grow seeds that you could then use in potions or use in combat, depending on what type of plant you're growing. There's a couple different types of plants. There's like maybe 6 or 8, right? 3 of them are used for offense, right? Venomous Tentacula, Chinese Chomping Cabbage, and one other I forget. You could brew different kinds of potions, right? Basically, the major one that you're going to brew is called Wiggenweld. It's basically your Estus flask. It's your healing. One thing I noticed about this game, again, adding to its ease, is that when you play this game, at least on normal mode, I heard someone told me that on hard mode, this game is actually way different, but at least on normal mode and presumably easier modes than that, you basically, to my knowledge, cannot be one-shot by anything that's not like a story mode, like instant kill, right? So pretty much anything that hits you down, like critically, can only drop your HP to 1. As long as you have a Wiggenweld, you could just heal up. And the upgrade to Wiggenwelds basically makes them like a full heal. So by the end of the game, like, hilariously enough, it's not hard, actually. Like, this game is actually pretty easy. Now, obviously, if you want to do style points and be good at the combat, that's another thing. But if you just want to Final Fantasy 15 tank your way through the game from start to finish, hey, I mean, that's pretty much it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not meant to be hard, and then they sure as fuck make sure you know that, right? So yeah, beyond that, the combat becomes easy, especially towards the middle of the game when you could start affording things like multiple brewing and multiple planters, right, and brewing stations, and then you could just spam out Wiggenweld. So quite frequently what I would do is I would just go back to my room of requirement after every mission and just print out up to 25, because that's the cap, you can't raise it, 25 Wiggenwelds, however much I'm missing, then just leave. And the potions take time to brew. They don't take a lot of time, which I guess, again, you could argue that could increase the difficulty. Wiggenwelds take 15 seconds to brew per potion, so when you have 8 different potion stations, it's very fast. Within like a minute or two, you have all your potions, and that's it, right, for moving back and forth to redo it. One thing I do like is that you don't have to constantly buy seeds. Once you buy a set of seeds, you basically have an infinite amount of them. You just put them in the planter, you come back after like 10 or so minutes to harvest it, boom, and you just go back out. It automatically replants it. Now, there's fertilizers you could put down to increase how much you get. I didn't really need to do that. It's fine. The other major thing about the room of requirement, besides you being able to decorate it with things you find around the game, or being able to put down facilities like brewing potions and the loom to upgrade equipment, or the book to decipher equipment, and because you get hidden items, basically, you have to take them there to decipher them, is that you could use it as a place to store fantastic beasts, right? So I believe you get 3 or 4 different places to store beasts that you find in the overworld. So around the halfway point in the game, you get this bag that lets you capture animals in the overworld, right? And obviously, if you find a male and female animal and you capture them of the same species and you bring them back to the room of requirement, you could go into one of these facilities and you could release them, you could brush them, you could pet them, and you could actually breed them towards the end of the game. I actually think that that's kind of cool how they had that feature. Obviously, again, mostly made for people to get immersed, but it also has its perks because the more you do things with these animals, the more you get items from them, right? You're able to, you get so many jobber knoller feathers, or whatever the hell it's called. And you could use it to increase certain equipment, things like that. Again, not necessary, but cool. It's obviously a good idea of a system, just happens to be in a game where most people probably won't really struggle with it that much. And ultimately, that's what comes down to Hogwarts Legacy. It's a good game with good ideas, but most of the time you will not struggle with this game if you've played even a handful of games prior, right? Again, the target audience for this game probably wasn't what it originally was intended to be. Feels more like the target audience kind of shifted as the game more or less became popular because of the controversy surrounding it. That said, I like the features of being able to, you know, groom and breed pets, things like that. Not all animals can be captured. Obviously, big spiders can't be captured. They're out there in the overworld. Speaking of the overworld, you can traverse the overworld on foot. You can traverse it on broom, and then towards the end of the game, you can traverse it on rideable beasts. Like I said, they basically keep unlocking things until literally the end of the game. So there was a lot of the rideable beasts you don't get until the end of the game. You get an on ground mount that you could use to like tackle enemies and things like that. That's literally like almost the last mission in the game. Same thing with a lot of the killing curses. In fact, I didn't even get one of the killing curses until the post game, which kind of makes it redundant. That said, you don't need it. So again, take that as you will. And while I like the overworld, I will say it's not empty per se. It's that for the most part, it does not have the same level of design and care that Hogwarts, Hogsmeade, and a select couple of areas around the overworld have. Now, I will say this. I understand that a lot of times people say overworld's empty, and in my opinion, it's not, right? I think that there needs to be a good amount of running, a good amount of travel, a good amount of going from place to place in order for a world to really feel like you're going on a journey. If you're stopping every 5 seconds to interact with something, then I feel like it's too much. It feels too gamey, you know what I mean? Because in real life, let's face it, the overworld is pretty empty for the most part. Let's be real. But I get it. It's a video game. It has to walk that line. Now, if you're stopping every 5 seconds, it feels too much like a video game, right? It feels like you're doing too much to knock things off checklists. But on the flip side, you want to have a good amount of attention given to every area, right? So there's some towns hidden around the different places. A couple of them have interesting quests and things of that nature. There's no like raising your reputation in a town or whatever. There's just quests that you progress. Some of the quests are as simple as go here, kill something. Some of the other quests are, you know, more character driven, right? And tie into either one of the 3 major students I talked about earlier, or just in general, you know, just they wanted to take it back and all that stuff. You know what I mean? They wanted to have it be very simple. You're just helping people out in the overworld. At this time in the Hogwarts timeline, there's a lot of dark wizards roaming about with their agendas and trying to kill people, and they have no problems picking fights with students. There's also Ranrock's goblins running around trying to do their thing. And also there's just bandits and dangerous creatures and fairy, which are basically like undead. So there's a lot of dangers out in the world. Each one of them has a different way of fighting and different styles. So like, for example, the Inferi, you have to fight by lighting them on fire first, which makes the fire spells very important, and things and other things along those lines. Beyond that, I will also say that I do like the overworld, but I do wish there was maybe a little bit more. It is big. It's a big overworld. The size is not the problem, right? There's some things that are like platforming puzzles here and there, which are kind of cool. They have you know, your typical gauntlet of different interesting things. But like I said, other than a couple sprinkles, Hogwarts and Hogsmeade really take the cake. Hogwarts especially might be one of the most detailed areas I've ever seen in a video game. It's obvious they put the vast majority of their efforts into detailing Hogwarts as a location. So from the start of the game, obviously you can't do much because you don't have a lot of spells. You don't have enough. You haven't progressed the game. You can't access all the areas. But even towards the end of the game, I was finding different things around Hogwarts. So for example, they give you a spell called Revelio. It's not a normal spell. It's on the D-pad. But when you cast Revelio, it basically as the name suggests, it reveals any nearby objects or items or things of interest that you have not interacted with. So throughout the game, you find what's called guidebook pages, right? They introduce this to you literally at the start of the game. So what you can do, there's guidebook pages around the game that give you lore, information. It's basically like your scans, your 100% checklist for finding things around the world. Now, some of these things, let's be fair here. In Hogwarts, a lot of them are like things that you've seen around movies or, you know, previously, etc. So I have not seen any of the Fantastic Beasts movies, by the way, just FYI. So I don't know how much Hogwarts plays a role in them. I have no idea. but you can find them flying around, which you'll need to use a spell to grab them. Usually just walking up to a page and casting Revelio is good enough. Also, you could get them from completing quests, finding items, entering areas that are hidden in Hogwarts. There's actually a lot of hidden areas, and this place is big. Like, if you look at my playthrough, up until the very end of the game, I was finding new locations in Hogwarts that I had run by or just not been able to find. So to help you explore the world, you also get Alohomora, which is a lock-picking spell. It is the most basic lock-picking spell I have ever seen in a game, and I understand why, because if you ever play Fallout, I actually just got done playing Fallout 4 for the first time, you understand that you probably, in their mind, I know they did not want to have someone sit there and lock-pick a lock for 2 to 3 minutes at a time, right? Especially when you're talking about people who might not be as dexterous or as good with lock-picking as the average person. I could understand why they did that, right? I get it. Simple. They want this game to be simple. It's complex, but in very simplistic ways. They don't want to go overboard with it, right? Now, the way to level up Alohomora is not through experience. It's through finding these different things called Demiguise moons. It's a whole side quest that you get as part of as part of helping a teacher out, or he's a groundskeeper, but yeah, you get what I mean. Staff out. There's tons of different places to explore in Hogwarts that you could use Alohomora on. So there's constantly a level of Metroidvania-style backtracking, right? So you might get a new spell, right? Maybe the spell allows you to now lift something. You could lift it to solve a puzzle. You could Alohomora into some locks. Maybe you progressed in the story far enough. The only place that you cannot enter, that I know of, are other students' common rooms. Basically, whatever common room you pick, that's the common room that you got. So, make sure your choice of house is actually one of the most important choices in the game. I also don't know if you could change your wand. That might also be a very important one too. So yeah. Besides that, though, there's tons of stuff to do around Hogwarts. Like I said, Demiguise moons, field guide pages, right, giving you history and lore and backstory. All this was made to be immersive, true to the movies. I love it. For as someone who grew up in the 2000s when these movies were popping and big shit and literally like yearly entries and mind-blowing and amazing, right? It's such a nostalgia trip. It's so good. Even for me as a not big fan, I recognize things like obviously the dining hall. It's a little bit smaller than what I would imagine, right? Again, I wish the student body was bigger, which would necessitate making it maybe a little bit bigger to compensate, or a lot bigger. I feel like that's one of my big things. There's house tokens that you need to find around Hogwarts. When you get all 16 of them, you unlock a specialized item related to your house. I'll leave it at that. There's also moths that you can fly back to their mirrors that give you pages and things like that. There's puzzles warping between frog statues, and some of these are out in the overworld as well. Again, 60 to 70% of the development time went towards Hogwarts, and another maybe 15% went towards Hogsmeade. I'm estimating based on how I felt playing the game. It's obvious that Hogwarts was meant to be the centerpiece of this game, and it is, which is why I wish they had more things like classes or prefects or things like that. Something to really bring it to life. But that said, I also like that you're free to explore. You know what I mean? Like, it's not forced down your throat. They have mandatory stealth sequences or whatever. Because then I feel like the game might become Metroid Dread, where like you want to do a puzzle, but then you have to go hide in a room for 5 minutes or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe the casual approach is fine. I could see both sides of it, right? You know what I mean? Also, let's see, what else? Like I said, you get the tokens. There's different things like that. When you go outside of Hogwarts, right? And trust me, I spent the first maybe 5-10 hours between Hogsworth and Hogsmeade. It really, the game opens up. That said, like I said, not enough attention given outside of it. It's got its own unique charm to it, right? Like going through the Forbidden Forest was kind of cool. Going down to the southern coast was interesting. But for the most part, we know where the main meat is. Now, there are tombs around to explore. There's caves and things of that nature you could see. And it's fun and all that. It's cool. And I don't think it's bad. It just doesn't really add anything. It just feels like it's there just so that way the whole game isn't Hogwarts. So what I would like in the next game, right? Totally fine if they reuse this, expand the world that you have, right? So obviously, you know, maybe add a couple things here or there, you know, maybe some plot lines to continue, but maybe let's go to some other schools, you know, let's go to maybe, I don't know any of the other schools. I'm sorry, I don't. But let's maybe have that. Let's have different overworlds that we could traverse and we could go to and travel around and do the same thing. You know, maybe have these schools, let's flesh them out. You know, they don't have to be Hogwarts levels, but you know, it'd be cool. Hogwarts is like a big Zelda style dungeon, man. And you know, they have random events that happen. You could see the armor statues like elbow each other because they're enchanted. You could see the ghost sword fighting, things of that nature. They have dungeons you could find in Hogwarts, different classrooms in the basements or in the tallest towers, you know, faculty rooms you could explore to find lore about the faculty members and things of that nature. It's got so much in-depthness to it. I want that in the rest of the world, I think. As I said, you could also go to Hogsmeade. Hogsmeade has the same sort of treatment, which I think is fine. So you could go out and about around Hogsmeade and grab things in that nature. You could Aloha Mora, there's Demiguise moons, etc., things like that. Oh man, like I said, I really got into this game. This game, I think, wins the immersiveness. I think the immersion of the game is really good once you're feeling it. Now, let me talk about something that I did not like about this game. The spell swapping. So in this game, you can equip up to 16 different spells. There's 4 different palettes. I don't know how this works on PC, but on console, you basically tap R2 to shoot magic, and then you can hold R2 and then press a button, I believe. I forget the exact control inputs. I don't remember if I played it right now. But you can use 4 different magic spells on your palette. Now, once you use a spell, those spells go on cooldown. But what you could do is you could swap palettes, right? You could say, okay, well, I want to go, I think it's R2 and then the D-pad, right? You could toggle between your 4 different ones as you unlock them. The thing I don't like about this game is that having 4 spells and then not giving you like time slow to change your palette and help with combo ability definitely is a miss, right? I feel that, and again, I'm a 14 player, okay? I said the same thing about Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and I fucking love that game, okay? But I feel that instead of having L2 be like an aim function, or whatever it is, that being able to bind 8 different spells on either L2 or R2, and depending on which one you're pulling, you get different spells that you could then use with the face buttons, would be much better than this whole D-pad 4-way system that they have going. I did not like this system at all. And it's not game ruining because, again, the game is easy, but there's no time slow. And even if there was, I would just prefer being able to use L2, R2. And you obviously still need 16, right? That's pretty reasonable. So maybe then there's another button that you could push to swap to the other, 8 button palettes, right? There are so many different things I would have done about the control scheme than what they did. So for example, there's another class of spells, right? I talked about red, Room of Requirement, yellow, purple, and green, which are the curses. There's the, I guess, gray spells, which are basically like utility spells is what I call them. I don't know if they're actually called that in the game. And the biggest problem I have with the utility spells is that, okay, Lumos is important, right? Lumos, it's needed for puzzles, it's needed for dark areas, it's needed to retract vines that will grab you and insta-kill you, as I found out. It's needed in general. They also give you Wingardium Leviosa, which, if you know your Harry Potter mythology and everything, is a spell that's used to make things levitate, but it's automatically cast when you use the spell Accio, which is a spell that allows you to pull items to you. It's used for puzzles, which is also used in combat as well, to pull enemies towards you and pull them off balance. So my biggest confusion is, why couldn't they have maybe had tap to use Revelio, tap down, I think it was, to use Revelio, and then hold down to use Lumos, right, to toggle Lumos off and on. Or even the reverse would have made more sense, right? I feel that there's a lot of weird things with the control scheme that could have maybe been a little bit better. For example, you have a radial wheel to choose between potions that you could use in battle with L1 or you know, the chomping cabbages and mandrake items that you could use with L1 as well, right? But on that same L1 menu, they have the Felix potion, right, which gets its own button. I don't know why. You can only chug it from that menu. You also have your broom on square and your mounts on triangle and circle. And I just think to myself, well, why couldn't we move the Felix potion as part of the radial wheel, like with all the other potions in the game, and then maybe L1 and X, when you're still holding it, makes you invisible. It does. What was it called? They don't give you the invisibility cloak in this game. What is it called? The invisibility spell. I don't remember what it's called. Why couldn't they have bound that to L1 and X, right? So that way now the utility spell set needs to just disappear, because they do have a lot of other spells that you get that are automatic. You don't equip them as abilities. There's Aloha Mora, for example, is just like a skill. It's hard to describe. It's like a skill. It's not an active spell that you cast. You walk up to a lock, and if you're that high enough of a lockpick level, you just press square and then Aloha Mora, and then you just open it and you go to the lockpick and minigame. I don't know why they didn't do that. Again, the stealth in this game is not hyper vital, but it would have been cool to just not have it take up a valuable, you know, real estate, as I call it. I feel like you're doing a lot of toggling between these 4 different spells that's just unnecessary, in my opinion. So personally, that is one thing, that's probably the biggest gameplay element I did not like. If you're in the middle of a big combat sequence with 12 enemies, all of them have different shields that you need to pop with different spell colors and things of that nature, the last thing I want to do is constantly be basically reaching down for my stick, right, and trying to change gears like I'm driving a car all over the place, you know what I mean? Like, it needs to be more fluid, it needs to be better. It would also help with the combo ability, because like I said, you could juggle enemies in this game. The combo ability is great. So usually you hit an enemy a couple of times, then okay, you use Accio to pull them towards you. Then what you could do is hit them a few times and then hit them with another spell, like Flipendo, to keep them flipping in the air. And then you could hit them with another spell, a damage spell to disarm them, or anything like that, right? And it would have been better and easier to pull off if you didn't have to constantly toggle that. That's my big critique about that. What else? Other than that, like I said, the game is not bad. It's just exactly what it wants to be and exactly what it feels like it needs to be. I like the story. I thought it was interesting. It wasn't the most groundbreaking, but it was cool to see play out. The soundtrack is perfect, by the way. They knew what the hell they were doing with this, man. This feels like you are literally living your own Harry Potter movie. And obviously, I don't want to buy into marketing hype, but it really does feel like you're running through like what would be a scene in the movie or something, right? And like I said, exploring Hogwarts and like all the different wings, it's so massive. Hogwarts has like 6 different teleport zones, each with their own fast travel, which, by the way, fast travels in this game, which is cool. Another thing I didn't mention is that stealth. You could use Petrificus Totalis to take out enemies. Again, the stealth is made to be easy in this game. It's not meant to be hard. Trying to think, what else did I forget? Yeah, you could customize your character. You could give them a first name, last name, things like that. You get my point, right? So what would I give Hogwarts Legacy? Well, obviously, like I said, pretty generic open world outside of a couple of key areas in the 2 major areas. Interesting plot. You know, they have different things. They have puzzles where and what's interesting, before I get into the finale here, what's interesting is that they have things like sliding block puzzles where you have to manipulate different blocks around a 3D environment. They have platforming puzzles, things of that nature. I like that. I wish they did it more. I get that, again, the one that I got stuck on took me 2 hours, right, to figure out. It took me like an hour and a half. I forget how long it took me. But I was there for a long time. That was like the majority of my session that day. But I like when they have things like that. You know, they have Accio puzzles and things like that. And I want more, right? This game is good. I know it's groundbreaking. I want more, okay? And I'm glad this game made a lot of money, because hopefully we'll get to see these concepts expanded in a sequel. Will it happen? I don't know. Warner Brothers might just take their money despite the controversy and just say, well, this was a W, a big W that we didn't expect. Thanks for the money, and we'll just, you know, we'll whatever. So I like that. I like that there's puzzles. I like that the game tries to do a lot of different things. There's a lot of interesting side quests. There's a lot of interesting plot lines and stories. Again, big things. I wish the characters, there was more school life, right? I wish there was more, more students, more you could tell the grades, you could do different things like that. I wish, again, that the controls were just a little bit better and condensed, right? There's no reason for a pole potion that you never use to take up a button, where otherwise it could be the invisibility spell. I think that utility spell thing needs to be reworked. I think that, the room of requirement spells, when you enter the room of requirement, unless you're in like a striking dummy area, should just be there. Like, I don't see why you have to constantly re-equip and unequip spells. Capturing beasts is cool. I actually really like that. And the upgrade system is cool, but again, you don't really need to do too much to get really high level in this game. So what would I give Hogwarts Legacy? Okay, I like this game. I think this game performs astoundingly well. It does what it needs to do. That said, I will only give this game an 85. And the reason why I will give it an 85 is because, again, there are a couple of different things about, like I said, the controls, the overworld, that I won't say it's empty. I just will say that it does not have obviously Hogwarts is going to get the lion's share of the attention. I feel that maybe having more areas that feel like mythical areas. Again, I know they have to kind of keep with the lore, so they could only, there's only so much they could stretch. I don't know how many of these villages were mentioned in books, right? I'm not too knowledgeable about the geography of Hogwarts and the surrounding areas, but I wish that they had done more with that, right? Had more areas, maybe in the further south area, that are, more unique, have interesting things about them. Maybe there are little mini hubs you come back to. I don't think the game needs a karma system. In the same way, I don't think it's necessary for the game to have like prefect stealth and consequences for spamming curses. That could be an interesting style of game. I don't think that like this game needed it. That said, I do think it would have been improved if it had some more elements to it. The House Cup should definitely have been a thing. I think that would have been really meaningful. And then like the end of the game, instead of just handing it to you, they could say, all right, well, while we have time at the end of the year, guys, let's compete for it. It's a neck and neck between all four of the houses. We've never seen this before. And then obviously you win, right? Again, we want you to win, but we want you to have to work for it a little bit, I guess you could argue that completing the main story is working for it, but I digress. Regardless, it's cool to see references to the movies and characters like the Weasleys and the Blacks. It's cool to see areas obviously taken basically almost shot for shot from the movie. The game looks amazing. It's great. But as I said, the gameplay, the controls could be better. The overworld could have more uniform attention given to it. Certain systems could be improved. Certain systems could be added. And ultimately, I will give it an 85. Now, I don't think it's a bad game at all. In fact, it's one of my favorite games I think I've played for the channel, because it's surprising how great it is in a lot of aspects, how refreshing it is, right? And how much of a nostalgia hit it is. But definitely needed a little bit more for that. Beyond that, I do not think that it's going to get DLC, sadly. I think that they only really wanted to release the game. I don't think they expected, this game to get the controversy it did for the things that I will not go into and for the sake of this review. It's extraneous to the game to begin with. And also, I do not think that they expected the game to be such a hit and to make tons of fucking money. So congratulations to Avalanche Studios. I think they made like Tack and the Power of Juju like almost 20 years ago or something. It's like the same studio, or I forget. But it's crazy to think that they kind of pulled this out. I think they really looked at what other open world games were doing and how they could capitalize on it. So an 85. Fantastic. Love it, man. It was a very fun experience. I enjoyed it. Next game, let's have more students with more backstory. Let's have multiple overworlds where we could explore the different wizarding worlds. Let's have a bigger plot, right? Let's have more of what you guys did with this main story. Expand it. Let's have another ancient magic plot. Maybe have the choices from this game, because there are choices in this game. But like I said, there's no karma system because that's not popular anymore. Let's be fair. Things of that nature. So I really like this, man. This was surprisingly fun, you know, to see all the teachers, all the different everything. Again, oh, and more classes as well. Even if it's renewable, like you could just redo the same classes over and over. I think it would be fun, right? To at least simulate it, right? Maybe get like experience, diminishing returns or something. I don't know. Because most of it is handled in cutscenes. I feel like being able to have that full immersion and integration into the world would be cool. Hilariously enough, the Pokemon games, Scarlet and Violet, that I hate, do this, actually, where you could have classes and then they have tests and midterms or whatever. It's not that serious, don't worry. But, like, I think that having that would be really awesome. So, yeah, I absolutely love this game. And you know what? Credit to them for this. I think that this game blew me away. And I will see you guys in the next verdict. So thank you and have a good one.